Undertale was released by Toby Fox on September 15, 2015, after having an immense rise to popularity through the website Kickstarter. This is largely due to the following that the game amassed when a demo was released in May of 2013. Undertale takes a lot of influence from games like Earthbound, with their wacky characters and interesting narrative direction. But why should you care? In a world with more games than could ever be played by one man, why does Undertale deserve the attention of the constantly overwhelmed consumer of media? Well, NPR's Anna Diaz explains this best when she said, "Undertale shaped the entertainment tastes of an entire generation and took on a new life through memes." Besides its cultural influence and its often talked about strong suits, which include dialogue, plot, characters, message, writing, etc., one of Undertale's strongest points is its attention to detail. This attention to detail is exactly what gives the Genocide route its edge over the other routes in the game. It's not a coincidence that sparing enemies in Undertale is a much more interactive process than killing them. And this fundamental truth of the game makes the vast majority of the Genocide route battles incredibly boring. Like clockwork, the player enters a new area and has to walk around in some random room, killing everything they encounter. The Genocide route also gives the player an immense amount of power. In fact, the game gives you so much power that the vast majority of basic fights throughout the route are finished in a few turns, with not much of a challenge actually being presented to the player. Past a certain point, the act of killing turns into an obligation. The player is ludicrously punished for partaking in the Genocide route by turning the act of gaming into a chore. The Genocide route isn't fun. This is, of course, with two exceptions that swing so far in the opposite direction that the player's experience turns to frustration as opposed to boredom. There are only two fights in the Genocide route that I would actually refer to as fights rather than executions: Undying the Undying and Sans. Undertale's Genocide route has a very methodical approach to gameplay. The game requires the player to kill a nauseatingly large amount of monsters, around 20 in each area, to fulfill the requirements of the route. This is boring and time-consuming for that matter. So, how about the two fights in the Genocide route that lay on the other side of the spectrum? Undying is essentially the halfway point for the player, as well as the player's first genuine challenge. Undying the Undying basically takes the approach that the normal Undying fight takes, but the difficulty is cranked to an unnecessarily high level. Attacks come at you at such a fast pace that the player finds themselves dodging them every single time at the very last second, or just not dodging them at all. Sans is arguably even more challenging. When Sans first fights you, he physically breaks the rules of the game by allowing himself to take the first turn. Sans is also the only enemy in the entirety of Undertale that dodges the player's attacks. In an iconic moment, Sans even admits that the first attack he uses is amongst his strongest, which directly contradicts the normalities of game design, where fights are supposed to become exponentially harder as time goes on. This approach to game design gives fights a natural sense of progression, which is something that the Sans fight clearly does not have. By all accounts and purposes, Sans cheats the player. In a desperate Hail Mary once he's been beaten, Sans even attempts to make his final turn last forever, not giving the player a chance to kill him and finish the game. This brings me to the main argument of the video essay. Though Undertale has a very satisfying climax, that being the fight with Sans, the actual ending of the Genocide route is unsatisfying. Without the comfort of the friends you've grown accustomed to on the other routes, the ending of the game feels sudden. In fact, the only closure the player gets is a monologue from a character they've never met before with the color black flooding the screen. I'd like to also add that Undertale is a game where music is a key point of world building and storytelling, yet the Genocide route is soaked with the sound of silence. How exactly does Undertale justify the Genocide route being so boring from a gameplay perspective? Well, the answer lies in the narrative. In Undertale, the player is presented with the choice of either killing or sparing the monsters they encounter. The game takes active steps to humanize these monsters, giving them personalities and allowing the player to interact with them. The game changes by emptying towns that are normally bustling and full, and by changing the music to make it sound more sinister and eerie. The use of atmosphere is primarily how Undertale justifies the genocide route. These changes narratively add a lot of weight to the player's killing of an entire society. The air in many of these areas is haunting, while in the other routes they are normally wondrous, fantastical towns. Waterfall is one of the best examples of an area taking on a totally different atmosphere post-genocide. The music in Waterfall is normally beautiful and mysterious. Low-octave piano chords add this sense of unlying mystery that forms much of Waterfall's ambiance, and bells are sprinkled in portraying mystique. Conversely, the theme's melody is rearranged during the genocide route, with the piano, synths, and drums being dropped in favor of a slowed-down, bell-only arrangement of the piece. The result is, without a doubt, haunting. One of the best theories that surrounds this version of the song is the idea that the bells are meant to sound like evacuation bells, or bells that may only ring in an emergency. Needless to say, the game purposely fills the player with a sense of dread as a punishment. As I've already discussed, the game throws the two hardest fights at you as mandatory challenges. This punishes the player for their actions by subjecting them to insanely difficult battles. This punishment is almost entirely derived from the fact that the player has to go out of their way to do the genocide route. One of the biggest themes explored in the writing of the genocide route is the concept of true heroism. Circling back to music once more, Undyne's theme when fighting her in the genocide route is called Battle Against a True Hero. The game very specifically outlines Undyne as the true hero of the genocide route. Her pre-battle dialogue reflects this. Deep in my soul, there's a burning feeling I can't describe. A burning feeling that won't let me die. If you get past me, you'll destroy them all, won't you? Undertale explores themes of determination. Every time the player dies, faces hardships, or even saves the game, determination is brought to the forefront of their attention. Even though the game implies that determination is a trait that monsters lack, Undyne seems to be the exception here. Undyne is determined to stop you, the player, from destroying everything. You. Not the character you play as, but the player themselves. The implications of this being that determination is not something that Frisk, the main character, has, but rather something that the player has. At the end of the day, Frisk doesn't choose to continue the fight. You do. As for Sans, he refers to himself as a judge, a symbol of morality and justice, just before the final fight. While Sans isn't exactly touting himself as a true hero in the same way that Undyne does, he still represents a powerful force of justice in the world. This all actively contributes to the primary moral of Undertale: empathy. By the end of the game, the player has won. However, they do not feel particularly proud. The genocide route in Undertale is the accumulation of the game's message, the consequences of being a terrible person. The genocide route punishes the player in ludic ways, specifically by either being profoundly boring or annoyingly difficult. And the genocide route also punishes the players in narrative ways, specifically by putting an increased emphasis on topics of grief and true heroism. The genocide route isn't enjoyable, but it isn't supposed to be. The lack of enjoyability and the disappointing ending add to the narrative competence and beauty of the genocide route as a storytelling device. Thank you.